You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, I am sitting in my chair to my fellow spelunkers with a eating grin on my face. I discovered something last night, spelunkers. In the Holy War, I cannot remain neutral. I know, shocking to a lot of you. It was a charade. It was a sham. I can't do it. I just can't do it. So obviously, this episode is going to be a lot about that game. It is unequivocally the best rivalry west of the Mississippi. Hands down, you can't come close. You can't. USC, UCLA, garbage. Arizona, Arizona State, they play football? Oregon, Washington? No. Oregon, Oregon State, they call that the Civil War. But, I mean, no, not really. Colorado, Colorado State? For a long time, that was two programs that were losing records versus losing records. So this is the best rivalry west of the Mississippi. Each team each year has something on the line. Hatreds run deep. Religious people turning into not-so-religious people. And grown men acting like children, like toddlers and whiny babies. So yes, we'll be getting into that. I'll also talk about the Jazz's start to the season, what I think will happen, and then I'll talk about some interesting goings-on in college basketball around Provo. Yep, it's a BYU heavy episode. That's just the way it's going to be. I apologize, but here we go. As always, please follow me on those socials at the Matt Cave Pod on X, the Matt Cave Podcast on Facebook, and then on YouTube you can find me, the Matt Cave Podcast, all one word, and then on twitch.tv/Matt's Cave, MATTSCAVE. I will be coming back to streaming hopefully this week. My back is starting to feel better, so this past week, okay, let's talk about this past week, spelunkers. Just for me on a personal note. I started the week with a strained lower back, and everybody who has hurt their back can commiserate with me here for a second. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to move. You don't want to talk. You don't even really want to play video games. You just want to lay down and just suffer when you hurt your back. That's all you want to do. And last week, that's how I came into last week. And then on Tuesday, I was starting to feel a little bit better. And then around noon, 12:30 during the workday, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, I got the flu. Oh, it was bad. All I could think about was just bed. That's it. Body aches, headaches, chills, all of that. Couldn't get warm. I had to shut it down. So I just went to bed, and I was basically in bed for 2 straight days. Started feeling better, but then my back started hurting again. And now here we are, Sunday. Back is starting to get better. I think I figured it out with my brother, what's going on. It's my work chair. I need to get it replaced somehow, some way, possibly get a loan. I don't know. But that chair is probably what is killing me. And so I need a new work chair, which thankfully is different from the one I podcast in and the one I do, streaming and YouTube content in. This chair's great. The other one, it's served me well for about 7 years. I think I need to tell it to shuffle off to Buffalo. But that was my week heading into this weekend. So I was in a very fragile state heading into the Holy War, which is not a good state to be in when you're in the state of the Holy War. And for about the first quarter and a half, I was trying really hard to stay neutral. I was taking notes of the game. I was going, oh, well, that was good from Utah. Oh, that was okay from BYU. I can see what they were trying to do there. All thrown out the window when Kalani Sitake and Jake Retzlaff didn't know how to run a 2-minute drill. Oh, man. And then I went full 2008 Matt, and I was done. My family heard me yell and shout. I was not rising and shouting. No. These Cougars were not out. I was done with them. They were out of me caring. But boy, oh boy, I shut down. I'm like, I even texted my family. I was like, I'm sorry for the outburst. I want to be better, and so I'm just going to disassociate, and everything is bad, and I'm just going to sit here with a frown on my face. And you know what? That's how I went through the second half of the game. I took notes, but they were very BYU-sided notes, and not a lot of them were positive. We'll get into it, but at least I was better than Utah AD Mark Harlan. Oh boy, we'll get into that. But let's talk about the game first. Last week I told you, the Holy War is wacky. You throw all of the prognostications out of the window, even my own. And it's the game on the field. It is a season within a season, and pretty much each quarter is a season within a quarter, is really how the Holy War is, for the majority of it. Obviously, there are a couple of outliers. Utah's win in 2011 was 54-10, not even close. BYU had a bunch of blowouts in the 80s and early 90s. You can throw those out the window. The majority of this rivalry is basically what we saw on November 9th into November 10th. And it was, as a neutral observer, I am sure this game was so much fun to watch. Just so much fun. I'm sure. But as somebody who had a dog in the fight, even though I really did not want to have one, I went in trying so hard to be neutral. On Friday, I had the naivete to tell my mom and my sister. Mom graduated from BYU in the 80s. Sister graduated from Utah in the 2010s. I said, I'm going to go into this with the attitude of, you know what, on Sunday, I'm going to have something to talk about. Now, like I told you earlier, that lasted about a quarter and a half. And then I can't, in this game, I cannot be neutral. I can't do it. It's not in my blood. I'm a BYU fan when BYU and Utah meet. I am. 100%. And I'm done acting. I'm done playing a charade for all of you. I don't think it's fair to use spelunkers when you probably saw straight through it the past couple of years. You probably did. I thought I was play acting very well, but you know what? I wasn't, and I'm going to own up to that, and I'm apologizing. In this game, I'm a BYU fan. I'm 34 years old now. I don't think I can ever change. I just feel like... Okay, so this is the BYU fan, Matt, talking here. Kalani Sitake is infinitely more rootable, if that's a word. You can root for him more so than you can for Kyle Whittingham. Kalani Sitake is all about love and friendship and bringing it all together, playing for your brother. And that's outward stuff. That's not behind closed doors. That's always been his message since he took over the BYU program. And I'm sure has been his message since he was a graduate assistant at BYU in 2004, I think. So that I feel like that's infinitely more palatable for me personally to root for. And then there's also how I know this for a fact because I've had friends play for Kalani Sitake. I've had acquaintances tell me what it's like playing for him. Help up your opponent. Kill them with kindness is kind of the mantra on the defensive side of the ball. Like, we're going to smack you down, but then we're going to help you up and tell you it's going to happen again. That's the sort of thing, right? And I don't feel that way when I watch Utah. With Utah, it's anger, it's rage, it's aggression, and cockiness, if I dare say. And a lot of the time, that's earned cockiness. It is. They did dominate the Pac-12 towards the end of the Pac-12's reign. There are asterisks you can throw around. USC fell apart. UCLA wasn't real. Oregon had Utah's number, which is true. Washington was up and down. So the Pac-12 was primed for the picking towards the end. There's your asterisk. But as somebody who's rooted for BYU all of his life, I tried to play the ruse. It didn't work. I just feel like, and that's my position. Obviously, as Utah fans out there, you're going to tell me I'm wrong and that I'm blind. I am, the royal blue blinders on and I'm missing stuff. And I'm sure I am. I am. That's part of fandom, right? You don't see things you don't want to see. So that's just how it all boiled to the surface towards the end of the first half there. I couldn't contain my passion anymore. And then towards the end of the second half, well, let's just get into the game. So in the first half, BYU looked out of sorts. Morgan Scalley, again, probably top 3 defensive mind in the country, with the other one of the top 3 being Jay Hill, just taking it to BYU. Laying down the lumber, laying down, this is how the game's going to be played. You better adjust, and if you adjust, we're going to have adjustments ready for your adjustments. That's what it looked like in the first half against a very overmatched Aaron Roderick. So in that first half, Utah looked like the better team. They really, really, really did. But then the second half, I noticed a switch. And the switch was BYU's defense. So in the first half, Brandon Rose looked good, and it was exactly what I told you all last week. This game, I had a sense of dread going in because it reminded me too much of that season where Brian Johnson was the guy all season. He got hurt, and then Kyle Whittingham was saying it's Brian Johnson, it's Brian Johnson, it's Brian Johnson. Then, oh, wait, oopsie-doo switcheroo here right before the game. It's Brett Ratliff. And Bronco Mendenhall had no idea what to do. And he couldn't adjust throughout the entire game. That's what the first half felt like to me. But Jay Hill is a better defensive coordinator than Bronco Mendenhall. Jay Hill is what Bronco Mendenhall wants to be when he grows up. So that's what happened in the first half. Utah had answers for the questions BYU was posing. Brandon Rose was charged up. He was ready to play. It was a rivalry game. He was juiced. It was his first start. And BYU didn't know what hit him. But then in the second half, Aaron Roderick started to get answers to those questions that Morgan Scalley was asking him, and Utah's offense disappeared completely and utterly. And give credit to BYU's defense there, because that's why the Utah offense disappeared. BYU's defense figured out the modus operandi of what Utah was trying to do, and they shut it down. They did. They shut it down. In the second half, Utah didn't score a point. Utah didn't get into the red zone in the second half. So BYU really put the clamps on and said, all right, enough's enough. The offense, where were they? The entire game, where were they until that last drive? Honestly, what happened? LJ Martin in the first half was averaging almost 8 yards a carry. And then Aaron Roderick went, well, that's cute, but I'm smarter than everybody, so we're going to throw the ball the rest of the game. Jake Retzlaff, 15. If you look at the stat sheet, and what do I tell you all the time, spelunkers? Don't be a stat sheet cheat. Because if you look at the stat sheet, Jake Retzlaff had a worse game than Brandon Rose. 15 to 33, 219 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Quarterback rating of 39. Brandon Rose, 12 to 21, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 72 quarterback rating. So if you just look at that stat sheet, Brandon Rose had the better game. But here comes the Hebrew Hucker, BYU. My nickname for him, I'm not even going to speak my nickname for him. It's gone. It's retired. He has stamped himself in BYU lore alongside John Beck, alongside Jaron Hall, even, dare I say, Max Hall, who has been supplanted now by Mark Harlan. Still going to get to that. He drives the team down to field goal range. Always looked in control. Didn't look panicked like Zach Wilson did against Utah. Didn't look like the game was too much for him like Riley Nelson. Didn't look like he had to carry the world on his shoulders like Taysom Hill. It just looked like another game for him. He shut me up. This is the game where Jake Retzlaff shut me up. Am I a believer yet? Not quite. But I'm not going to be as loud of a critic. Because he did it. BYU marches down the field, kicks the game-winning field goal. Game over. Well, not quite that simple, right? It never is in the Holy War. There was a timeout called by Kalani Sitake where Jake Retzlaff was dead to rights. He was sacked. Like, Morgan Scalley brought an all-out blitz. Aaron Roderick had 5 guys in protection. You don't need to be a genius to tell me who wins that matchup. But Kalani Sitake called a timeout. The Utah didn't think he got in time. All right. Timeouts are allowed. Kyle Whittingham's gotten a lot of those timeouts in his tenure at Utah. And I'm not just talking about in the Holy War. I'm just talking about in his tenure. And, okay, reset. Next play, incomplete. Probably should have been intercepted, honestly. And my nickname would have been stamped in BYU lore. But interception dropped. Next play, 4th down. Game, season on the line. Looks like Jake Retzlaff gets sacked. I was a little afraid he might have torn something in his leg the way everything got bent up, but he seemed to be okay. Game over. I was like, this happens every time. The game's too big for BYU. They can't do it. Hold on a second. Laundry on the field, and it didn't come from the stands. Came from the referees. Defensive holding on Jeremiah Vaughn against Keelan Marion. Was it defensive holding? The broadcast said unequivocally yes. Even the rules expert said yes. Utah fans will always, for now until eternity, say no. BYU fans will say, oh yeah. If we look at all the angles and we look at how the play rolled out, I'm going to leave this for you to decide, Spelunkers. You probably already have your decision. But from the ESPN broadcast angle, it was iffy. From the rear end zone, where BYU was driving towards, there was something there. Could have even been a face mask. From the stands on the other side of the field, from the last angle I told you about, so behind BYU, it was definite. There's grabbing, there's twisting, holding. But then, when did it happen? Did that happen while Jake Retzlaff was in the grasp? Because certainly was close. But if we just take that little snapshot, not the rest of the play, not the rest of the game, you take that snapshot, I would say 9 out of 10 times that gets called. 9 out of 10. And every defensive back on every snap does the exact same thing Jeremiah Vaughn does. He just happened to get caught. Okay? As a BYU fan, yeah, it's holding 10 times out of 10. You know, referees are part of the game. As Kalani Sitake said after the game, referees are part of the game. You just have to adapt to it, and we adapted to it, and we won. Sounds eerily familiar to what Kyle Whittingham has said a lot of times in the Holy War. Eerily familiar. When BYU fans and Bronco Mendenhall are crying foul, rigged, the officials are out to get us. Utah fans, you know, BYU fans have said this before. So now the roles have reversed here. And got that. And then Jake Retzlaff throws a dime under pressure to Chase Roberts, who 1,000 Hail Marys, sacrifices to whatever gods you've got. This guy is fantastic. He barely drops a pass. Anytime they need a first down, it's number 2. And they got it. Then another 10 yards to Darius Lassiter. And a 17-yard run on a speed option to Hinckley Ropati. I almost said Lupini Katoa. To Hinckley Ropati. And then Billy. Oh, Billy. Billy Farron. Growing up BYU fan. Earliest memory of his is talking to his dad about what the Holy War was and what it meant. Always wanted to kick in this game for BYU. Does it. Puts the dagger in. Stomps on the hearts of Utes fans. Game over. Well, not according to Mark Harlan. Mark Harlan, the athletic director, was on the sideline. I guess that's okay. But he was on the sideline where the coaches were. That's not okay. And not only that, he was chirping at the referees. He got flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. Not Kyle Whittingham, not Morgan Scalley. As you would expect, it's frustrating, right? Coaches can get frustrated at referees. The referees expect that. Not the athletic director of a program in your own conference and then walking, to the midfield, handshakes, all that stuff. You see Mark Harlan again pointing at the referee, saying some not safe for podcast words. Kyle Whittingham, Kalani Sitake. Kyle Whittingham interrupts his tirade at the referees to give a hug and a handshake and a good game to his friend, Kalani Sitake. And then immediately goes back and starts tirading again. Kalani Sitake, being on the Kyle Whittingham side before, kind of smiles, laughs, walks away, gives handshakes, good games to everybody. One thing I want to point out, all this chaos, all of this babying and whining about the officials, I want to point out two University of Utah guys who have earned my undying respect and fandom. One, Mekhi Bernard. Warrior. You cannot say another word for this guy. Warrior. He shook hands with every BYU captain. He hugged any BYU player that came over. And he was smiling and talking to the BYU coaching staff. That's a captain. That's a guy I would fight for. That is a guy who's won my undying respect because he played hard. He played to win. If it were up to him, Utah would have won. But it wasn't up to him. The other, head coach in waiting, Morgan Scalley. Hugged, handshakes, his counterparts on BYU. And he didn't have to do this. He went over to Jake Retzlaff, shook his hand, and talked to him for a solid 30 to 45 seconds. And it was cordial. It wasn't taunting. It wasn't yelling. It was cordial. It was a good game. It was something I want to see in Rivalry. You give it, you lay it all out on the field. Everything you have. But you leave it on the field. That's what this rivalry needs more of. Not grown men taunting 14, 13-year-olds for wearing a BYU tie after their team won. Relentlessly for 10 years. Yeah, that happened to me. So that's what happened. Now, let's move on. Kyle Whittingham, understandably frustrated. Said the officiating wasn't where it needed to be. I mean, it was bad both ways, Kyle. The missed face mask, the soft roughing the passer penalty. You got 7 points out of that. BYU only got 3 out of theirs. So, I mean, net positive for you, right? But then Mark Harlan, athletic director of the University of Utah, says, and I quote, oh, shoot, sorry, wrong thing. And I quote, this game was absolutely stolen from us. We were excited about being in the Big 12, but not tonight, I'm not. We won this game. Someone else stole it from us. Very disappointed. I will talk to the commissioner. This was not fair to our team. I'm disgusted by the professionalism of the officiating crew tonight. End quote. That's not what a leader of a university, a leader of young men and women who are supposed to comport themselves well, which, by the way, the captains and the people who spoke to the media for the BYU, for the Utah players and BYU players, but for the Utah players, they comported themselves very well after the game. They were the adults in the room, not Mark Harlan. This sounded like a very sour-graped fan, which fans are allowed to do, right? They don't represent the university. I mean, they kind of do, but not really, not in any official capacity. And it sounded like he didn't even want to come to the Big 12. Sort of like, yeah, we came here and we did it, as a favor to you guys. But now you're screwing us? No, Mark, no. You just don't have the Pac-12 referees backing you up anymore in these big games. I know. Bummer, huh? But hey, you got those Pac-12 championships, right? Right. You can go back if you want. It's okay. You can refund the conference fees and all that stuff and go back to the Pac-12. It's okay. I've heard it's making a comeback. So that was inexcusable. After all of the bad calls in this rivalry over the years, I'd never heard Urban Meyer really talk about it. Never heard Gary Croton talk about him. Never really heard Kyle Whittingham talk about him. He said his stuff that he always says, it could have gone either way, coach speak. I never heard Kalani Sitake in an interview environment really go off like that. Even Bronco Mendenhall didn't. But Mark Harlan, What are you doing, man? What are you doing? So, yeah. Color me not a fan of him either. BYU 22, Utah 21. BYU's undefeated season rolls on, and Utah's season of ignominy. Try to say that 10 times fast. Even once. I couldn't even say it once normally. Continues on. And honestly, this season, I'm so happy about it. Okay, let's move on really quickly. Utah Jazz. They have 2 wins. I want them to have 0. That's where I would be happiest. They beat the Spurs by 1. And they now leave the Philadelphia 76ers, I believe, as the only team in the NBA with 1 win. Utah sits at 2-7 on the season thus far, behind everyone in the West, which is exactly where Jazz fans need them to be. I don't care if they win games. I really don't want them to win games. And in this particular game, they played a lot of veteran minutes, which I hope was just kind of a showcase for teams saying, hey, come get these guys. They can still play. We just need some draft picks and some younger guys. Or expiring contracts if you got them. I think that's what that was. Because there is a definite shift towards young players in the rotation, which I'm all for. Told you this is what I wanted 3 years ago. Whatever. But that's where we're at with the Jazz. As far as trades go, I've heard the crazy rumors of Giannis Antetokounmpo coming to Utah. That's not happening. Utah would have to give up everything to get him. And honestly, I don't think he'd want to come to Utah. And it's not because of the free agency stuff and the perception of Utah. It's because he wants to win. And that's not going to happen in Utah for at least another year or 2. That's kind of where we're at. So that throw that out the window. That's a pie in the sky deal. If anybody could make it happen, it would be Danny Ainge, but the Bucks would have to be at the trade deadline 30 games under 500 and completely out of it for them to even consider a deal like that. So that's the season for Utah. Occasional wins, flashes from the young guys, but losses. That's what Jazz fans need to root for. That's what I'm personally rooting for. That's what needs to happen. And lastly, let's talk about BYU and their men's basketball team, just for a second. So this year is an unknown for BYU men's basketball. Brand new coach, crazy hype surrounding him, a bunch of guys transferring in, getting recruited. But there's one guy in particular, Igor Demin, who is giving people vibes of, I don't want to say Magic Johnson because that's not fair to anybody, but this kid's vision is insane. He had 11 assists his first game. He had 7 assists in his second game. And it's crazy. He's so calm and confident on the ball for a freshman that whoa. He's that good. He is lottery pick bound. If he stays healthy and he just continues, he doesn't even need to do better than what he's doing right now. If he could just continues where he's at, lottery pick. Easy. And I'm not talking late lottery, Jimmer Fredette to the Kings lottery. I'm talking top 6. That's where a lot of people, Tony Jones, Jay Billis, a lot of these guys have him going right now. Obviously, we're only 2 games into the season, so kind of need to pump the brakes on the hype train there. But the early returns on this kid are as advertised, if not more, than what was being talked about when he was recruited. So, whoa. All right. That's the show this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening. No video game talk. I apologize. No Utah Hockey Club talk because, well, it's kind of tragic right now. It'll get better. But agree with me, disagree with me. Tell me the Utah side of you. Let me know, please, on social, in the comments, wherever you're listening, however you listen. Please rate and review, 5 stars, thumbs up, whatever it is, however you listen. And I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave. Oh, and one more thing.